everyone. Welcome everyone and to this first committee event of accounting and auditing on Audit Trail. And I think this is a very important topic because Audit Trail is a new provision. Of course, it has now been tested by listed companies, but most of the private companies are under still a finalization stage, and auditors are still grappling with the challenges of audit trail reporting requirement. I also welcome President Vijay Bhai Bhatt, who is out of his busy schedule, is attending today's event, and I will request President to give his opening remarks and introduce CTC to non-members. Vijay Bhai, over to you.
Thank you, Tejas Bhai. Good evening, everyone. All the participants, I heartily welcome. As Tejas Bhai mentioned, but nothing like that busy schedule. It's always a pleasure of learning experience with the chamber platform anytime. And today it is my opportunity also to learn something out of this fantastic session arranged by the Accounting and Auditing Committee, led by Tejas Parikh as chairman, and along with his teammates Yogesh Amal and Deepak Shah. I welcome everyone. I also take this opportunity to welcome our learned speaker, CA Shri Narasimhan Elangovan. Welcome, Narasimhan ji, to
Thank
our
you.
chamber platform. All the delegates are eager to listen to you. I've
Thank
been
you.
told that there are many members who have enrolled today who are non-members of the chamber. So for their benefit, quickly I will brief you about all of you about the chamber activity. As you all know, the Chamber of Tax Consultant, I will address it as chamber, was formed in 1926. After 1 year, we will be celebrating centenary year of this association. Our association is primarily into spreading of knowledge by way of holding various seminars, webinars, and workshops, RRCs, all related to taxation, whether it is direct tax, indirect tax, international tax, and so on and so forth. In addition, of course, as today we are going to witness accounting and auditing aspect also relating to this audit trail, which is very important chapter in this our entire audit aspect. Apart from this, we have our student committee which is doing lot many activities about the students, whether it is moot court competitions across various cities, also holding national level we are holding debates and essay competitions for the students. We have our monthly journal known as chambers journal is every month we are issuing, and that is for it contains special issue on a particular topic. Various articles are written and presented to the readers. In fact, now we are coming out with the budget issue, which is a hot topic of the day. So on the current topic, based upon that, we publish our journal. We have student journal also on quarterly basis called Jignasa, and we have international tax journal also on a quarterly basis. I won't take much of the time except stating that I request all those who are non-members to become member of the chamber. We have our website where you could today register yourself, ctconline.org. Our office is in Mumbai, right behind the Aikar Bhavan in near Churchgate area. So you can visit also, or alternately you can become member online by selecting your category of the applicable membership. And I wish everyone a happy learning on this audit trail, where Mr. Narsimhan will lead us to the destination after completing the trail. Over to the organizers once again. Thank you all. Happy learning.
Yeah. Thank you, Vijay Bhai, for the opening remarks. And I think thanks to my committee, especially I think Yogesh Bhai arranged and was discussing with Narsimhan, and we were able to hold it in a very quick time. And thanks to Narsimhan ji for accepting well in time so that we could keep it this because time sensitive topic, and we could arrange it well in time. Without much further thing, I would request Deepak to introduce today's speaker, and then we can start the today's session.
Uh, Thank you, Tejas bhai. So it's privileged to introduce the speaker, and I think this is 2.0 for today's speaker. Last year we had it, and it was really a very, very great learning for every one of us. and today it's 2.0. So, CA Narasimhan Elangovan, he's FCA, CS, DISA, Diploma in FR, CISA, LLB, CDPSE. He's partner of Canon Company and senior advisor, Digital Security Services in Crow Advisory Services. He's also honorary program director in ISACA Bangalore chapter. He's futurist, cybersecurity auditor, and a keynote speaker. His area of practice includes cybersecurity audits, SOC 2 attestations, auditing emerging technologies such as AI, big data, IoT. He's faculty for DISA, CISA, and courses on blockchain technology. He has authored more than 6 books on ICI, KSCAA, etc. on technology. He is regular speaker on technology at various national and international conferences of ICI, ISACA, CII, FICCI, etc. He has often addressed the ISACA international conferences at Asia CACS, Europe CACS, Africa CACS, North America CACS, and was often amongst the top rated and the youngest speaker. He has been identified as one of the top 10 influential consulting leaders 2020 and annual recognition for torchbearers in the consultancy sphere. So we are, with this short but a very depth introduction, we all are very lucky to have him with us. Please, we welcome you.
Thank you so much. It's in fact wonderful that I've been invited second time, because the first time lot of deliberations were purely on theoretical grounds, how it could be, because nothing was put into practice except for the fact that we knew there is a guideline, right? But then came the guidance note, then gave some lot of literature around it, right? So I am while I'm going to definitely take you through some of the slides, I'm going to do a slightly different approach. I have some of these notes and other things which I would probably want to share it with you and give you a perspective of what this is and how it is, right? And then I'll talk about some practical difficulties which we are facing, what are the challenges, and make it slightly more interactive in that particular context, right? So thank you first of all for inviting, and if I could probably quickly get started by sharing this Word document, and it has a summary of what the requirements are, right? And I'm hoping that you will be able to read through this, or at least the screen is visible, right?
Yeah, it
So
is
this all
visible.
happened because of this wonderful amendment which happens in the Companies Act every now and then. And this time around, it was adding a new provision which people thought, hey, it's just one small thing, but we'll probably see whether it's a so-called small thing or it's something which we have to really worry about, right? So the first thing which was done was effective 1st of April 2023, auditor has to report. That is the most important thing. That means the financial year 23-24, we have to do the reporting. Prior years, it was optional because the auditor's guideline did not make a mention of it. The company's accounts rules made a mention, but the audit guidelines had that bit of a interpretation issue, right? So let's only focus on financial year 23-24. Now, whether the company has used such accounting software, the first wording which they've used is accounting software. Now, if I go back and look into what is the meaning of accounting software, is a little tricky thing. So where do I draw guidance from? I can draw anything under the planet. I thought better to draw guidance from our own ICA guidance, right? Because that is where you have all this information, literature, all given, right? So if you go into the accounting guidance note, they clearly say what is an audit trail, what is the meaning of books of accounts, all of those. But the simplest analogy which all of them are drawing is the fact that any automated processing is what would be considered. So if a software is doing something as a manual feed or any of those things, that one could possibly say, hey, it should be kept outside the purview, right? So that is the first thing which I wanted to give some clarity, right? The second thing is, how do I refer to the accounting software? Now, if I go to the accounting software, look at the words after that, for maintaining books of accounts. And therefore, we go and read what is the meaning of books of accounts. Books of accounts have been interpreted to be fairly very, very wide. Why? Because if I read through the definition of books of accounts, which I'll probably bring it in a minute, to subsection 13, it says that, hey, your books of accounts could be a variety of things, starting from all sums money received, expended, which means any solution used for tracking receipts and payments is also books of accounts, right? All sales and purchase of goods, which means I am having an invoice which is used for, I'm having a software, beg your pardon, I'm having a software where I'm generating invoices, preparing the purchases, ledgers, all of those could be interpreted in this way as books of accounts, right? Assets and liabilities of the company, including fixed asset tracking software, unfortunately, or I have a software to track my liabilities, loans, for whatever reasons, right? If it's a bank, I have a loan management software, if this is applicable. Cost audit account, if there are some requirements, even those probably could come under this category, right? So the definition is fairly wide, right? So with that, let's come back to what we were looking at, right? Whether a company has used an accounting software for maintaining the books of accounts, very important, which has a feature of recording an audit trail within bracket edit log facility. Now, this becomes very important for us to understand, meaning every time a transaction is entered, you need not have a log of that. A transaction is entered, subsequently that has been edited, you need to have a log of it. That means if I am passing an entry, right, the focus is not in having a log of what entry I have passed. Why? Because the log of entry which I have passed is nothing but the entry itself, right? How many things will I have? The entry is saying that I have passed the journal entry or the transaction, whatever I've done. It says I have done this at so and so time with so and so, time, date. This is the data. This is what I've entered, etc. But if I keep a log for that as well, you're asking for too much. But what is it, the expectation? Edit log. That means if a transaction is passed and then it is edited, that is where this comes into picture. And this edit log should have been operated throughout the year. Very important. From the 1st of April 2023, it should have been operating. Failure to do which, you can go ahead and mention in your report that effective this date only certain softwares have been enabled, right? That's absolutely fine. And it should be recorded for all transactions recorded in the software. Now, if you look into it very interestingly, it uses the word transactions recorded. It does not use the word masters, right? Now, because it is a law, right, you can't expect the law to keep on giving so much elements of detail. And therefore, we'll have to understand what is the meaning of transaction versus master. In a layman's language, a tally ledger name is a master. How many times you use that ledger to pass an entry, that is a transaction. So masters are generally created once, reasonably expected to be constant. Transaction, as the name suggests, it's transactional in nature, right? So the way you have to interpret this is you have to interpret this for the purpose of transaction as well as for the purpose of master. And they're recorded in a software where the element of audit trail feature has been enabled, right? So which means I need to have an edit trail, which I made a mention, and that edit trail, that feature, my dear friends, should have been what? Enabled, right? Now, given that these two are done, the next point it says that audit trail should not have been tampered. Now, this is a very tricky thing. Should we have an audit trail for the audit trail? Meaning, what if the audit trail itself somebody has gone and tampered? Now, this becomes very tricky, right? So, somebody was asking, sir, can it go as complex as having an audit trail for the audit trail? Maybe yes, because you'll have to prove the fact that that audit trail has not been tampered, right? So, you have a primary transaction. Somebody has edited an entry. It appears in your edit log. Now, somebody went and modified that edit log. That is what we are speaking, right? Even such a feature should not have been there, and that audit trail feature has not been tampered. Unfortunately, you have to give an opinion on that. And this audit trail has to be preserved for 8 years, of course, on a prospective basis. So this is the only point which currently you're not auditing this year because it's just the first year. In fact, next year when you're auditing for financial year 24-25, you should also check whether the audit trail of 23-24 is still existing or not, right? So that's the fundamental definition, right? Now we also looked into accounting software that maintains records of all transactions, and books of accounts. I just spoke about what is books of accounts, and I also told about what is Audit Trail. And there's an expectation that the management is responsible for identifying the applications, identifying the records and transactions, configuring this, maintaining the audit logs, and retain. And by the way, this is a management responsibility statement. Those of you who are obtaining the written representation from management, please add this as well, right? And with that, the crux of this issue is resolved. But then comes a very interesting question. What are the practical implementation challenges, right? How do I look into it, right? I am talking about multiple ERPs today. Some of them are cloud-based ERP. Those of you are aware what is a cloud-based ERP. In a layman's language, cloud-based ERP is you are having a web portal through which you are trying to log in, right? You are using a web portal so that you are trying to log in. And when you're logging in through a web portal, the data is not residing in your own organization. It is rather residing in a end entity, wherever your data is being stored, the data is residing at that particular location. An example could be, let's say you're using a software like Zoho. Zoho could have their own data center. I mean, either their own or they have an MOU with or an agreement with another company. It could be residing there, right? You can talk about Tally, whereas the Tally's system or operating is a little different. They have their own version of an audit trail, and that is hosted within your client's organization's environment, and there you will have all these features, right? So that's basically the background of this requirements. Now, if I probably go a little from a presentation perspective, right? What is it that the auditor has to verify? Because we know what the requirement is. First, whether the audit trail feature is configurable or not. First question. Is there a feature of a configuration, or by default everything has an audit trail? 99% of the cases, SAP by default has an audit trail enabled, right? But that is only at the application, not at the database. Now, one could ask, hey, what is this application and database? Another complexity which is there, right? Again, that's another practical challenge. When we are talking of audit trail, my dear friends, any software will generally have 2 or 3 layers. The first layer, if you have, again, I'll go back to our Tally as an example, because most of you are conversant with Tally and you'll be able to understand that better. Now, Tally as a software, you are accessing from one of the systems in your office, but that is not where the Tally data is or Tally data path is, right? It could be probably in a server or /ABC server hyphen tally.erp9/data. That is where some organizations you would be retaining, right? Now that is, let us understand, as the application is hosted there, the license to use that is being running in another system. So this, let us call it as a presentation layer. This, let us call it as application. Now, Tally being a smaller system, the application layer also has an inbuilt database layer within that. So if you go into any of the folders, tally.erp9/data, you'll find 10000, 10001, 1002. If you open that, there will be a lot of files which you and I will not be able to understand. In fact, you double click it also, Microsoft will ask you, hey, how do you want me to open this? Right? Because that is a file which only Tally can read it. And that is the database. Now, in larger organizations or enterprise applications, that database itself is a separate setup which is hosted on a separate server, right? They call it as a database server, and they run using some solutions such as Oracle database, Microsoft SQL, right? These are all the solutions which run. Now, that means I am talking about 2 logical things from an audit trail perspective, because the front end is only for data entry. So let's ignore that, the presentation layer, the application layer and the database layer. The application layer is where front end you can key in information. So you and I can pass entries in the front end, which means you and I can also modify, delete, alter, and therefore the front end should have the element of audit trail. On the contrary, let's go one step backwards. What happens to the database? Right? What happens to the database? The database also should require an audit trail. Very, very, very important. Very important, because in most of the softwares and solutions, the backend database does not have an audit trail. What is the meaning of that? Can I go ahead and do modifications in the backend directly? Unfortunately, yes. You heard me right. Right? So unfortunately, there are some solutions which do not have a log of the changes made at the back end. So front end, you are protecting it. Back end, you have done some changes. The whole purpose is defeated, right? So therefore, this audit trail feature, you have to check whether it's configurable or not, and you have to check it from front end as well as back end. In front end, I told you every application should have a feature to record it. I have, in the last 6 months, when I've done some of these assessments, right, especially from early Jan Feb, some of the custom built software do not have a feature of audit trail at all. I repeat it. Most of the, I will not even say some, most of the custom built software which is used for SME players or smaller players do not have this feature, and therefore, as an auditor, go ahead and report that certain solutions do not have this. I'll talk about reporting. I'll also talk about some nice author who's compiled with some resources, which I'll share the links as well. Right. So that is the first thing. Second, right, when I'm talking about customized application or non-customized, that means standard off the shelf, like the likes of Zoho, Tally, SAP, right? You have to bear in mind this audit trail has to be enabled at the front end as well as back end. But important to note the way each of these software works. If you are making any of the software as a solution component, SaaS companies, database audit trail, you cannot check. There is no ways you can check it. But application audit trail, you can check it. Database audit trail, you cannot check it. Are you clear with me? Example, you want to go ahead and check with Zoho whether you're using Zoho books as your client, you meaning your client is using Zoho books, you're auditing. Now you want to check, hey, is Zoho books having a backend audit trail from a database standpoint? From the front end application, you will not be able to check that. The only way you can check that is obviously by asking Zoho, or Zoho would have submitted some report such as a SOC 1 report, SOC 1, or a SAE 3402 report. When you read that report, you will get to know whether the backend audit trail from a database standpoint is enabled or not. It is generally enabled. That is what is my given understanding, right? Point number one. The same thing if it is on-premise hosted, meaning I have it in my own server. Front end and back end, as an auditor, you have to check it. There could be a third situation where I've hosted on the cloud, but the cloud is called as an infrastructure as a service, which is in simple language, or a co-location service, which is where in a co-location the server space belongs to me. Some data center is there, like a Control S, Airtel, Sifi, etc. They provide all internet connectivity. The racks belong to me. I have to build the racks, configure racks, set up the racks, everything I have to do, right? Once I do all of those, I am able to access this information, etc. Great. But when I set up that rack, I am the person who will set up the hardware, software, etc. So therefore, it is my responsibility. If I am using Azure or AWS, and I have configured the, assuming SAP, right? SAP runs on Microsoft Azure in some cases, which I have noticed. They have a Azure stack where they have a database, they have application. you will have to check that database and application as well. So the rule of thumb is, please check whether database you need to check or not is purely depending upon whether is it a SaaS or non-SaaS. Non-SaaS could be on-premise, non-SaaS could be Azure hosted, AWS hosted, different models. But please check whether my responsibility as the software vendor is for the end to end, or the configuration and this thing is dependent upon a client specific requirement. So therefore, based on that, you can check it. Second thing you have to check whether this audit trail feature was enabled throughout the year. All of these solutions, especially where you have enabled, and I'll show you some of the screenshots, will give you an indication the date from which it is applicable if they have done a configuration, right? And this date obviously has to be before 1st of April 2024, right? So there is a small bottleneck, sorry, 1st April, beg your pardon, 1st of April 2023. There is a small bottleneck in this entire thing. I think the 1st of April 2023 falls on a Saturday, right? 2nd of April on Sunday. I've seen some solutions where how do you put it? The audit trail is effective from April 3rd, 2023. I'm just giving you a practical thing which I have noticed. Just giving you a heads up. I don't think that should materially change anything unless there has been some transactions which have taken place on that Saturday and Sunday, just as a honesty. One more big question which people say, so now audit trail is enabled. That means I cannot go and do backdated entry. Please note, just because you have enabled audit trail, it doesn't mean that you cannot go and do backdated entry. That's a different story. You can have an audit trail and you can still go and do a backdated entry. It's like a CCTV camera which is there and still some mischief is happening, right? Right? So it can still happen. But the question is, what is the rationale for you doing the backdated entry? Maybe you get the accounts only once a week. So you are doing a backdated entry. Great. You do only monthly accounting. Maybe. Please note, the law never said you need to do daily accounting. You need to have the transactions immediately. Please, incorrectly, many of them are interpreting this, right? So whether the transaction recorded in the software has the audit trail feature, the software refers to books of accounts and all of them. Now, when I use the word all of them, what are the most popular solutions which are covered, right? One is obviously your core accounting ERP or your accounting software. Two, your payroll related processing, right? Payroll related processing. Three, any activities which is for purchase, sale, procurement, sale, bank, fixed assets, all of those will get covered. And we already looked into books of accounts definition, right? Fourth point is something you need not check for last year, because the audit trail has been preserved as per statutory requirements for record retention. You can just go ahead. But let me give you a caveat here also. Some of the companies, they enable logs only for 90 days. And this is where the tricky situation is. They have logs enabled for 90 days and this becomes very tricky. And that is why clearly understand the intention of the law is to have edit trail, not a log for everything. Audit edit trail is what you have to focus on, right? So edit trail is what? A transaction is passed, you are editing it, only then it should be visible in the edit trail. If a transaction is passed, no changes have taken place, you need not bother about it, right? Please keep that in mind. And we spoke about books of accounts and the fact that each and every change made in the books of account should be recorded, right? So we spoke about this. We spoke about applicability. Unfortunately, this is applicable for all companies, even to foreign companies. In case of consolidated financial statements, it's applicable. If components are outside India, maybe some subsidiaries or whatever, you could consider excluding them. Repeat, you could consider excluding them. The words used as components, right? So the words used as components. So therefore, this could possibly be, something carefully which you'll have to look into. I hope so far all of you are clear with the flow and the thoughts. I know some questions are coming in. Let me finish the flow and probably I'll pause for a few minutes before I get into those practical nuances. Then we could probably have some of these questions. Another question is, what if the record is No record in electronic form. Somebody told, sir, we are doing manual bookkeeping, so is it something which is required? I don't think that error probably exists. Maybe you might have some at least 3 or 4 entries, something in an Excel, you might probably keeping it. So yeah, I think you will have to keep that in mind, right? And what is the format in which, from a documentation perspective, you are recommended to keep? This is an example. Name of the accounting software, what are the records maintained, financial, sales, purchases, etc. Location hosted. Location hosted is not mandatory here. It is just as an additional point which I recommend. Whether it's maintained in-house or outsourced, highly recommended that you get this. What is the database? What is the operating system? Because the audit trail is required for both database, application, as well as OS. But OS level audit trail, we need not go into so much of those, because generally at that level the possibility of changes is very remote, right? And whether audit trail has been enabled or not. So this is a good document for you to consider from a work paper perspective, right? So I hope you got a fair bit of an idea. So this is just an example. I just picked it up from our ICA guidance note, right? Name of the accounting software, what are the books maintained, where it is hosted, whether it's in-house, etc. What is the database, and basics information, yes or no, right? So this becomes one way of putting it across, right? Now, preservation, I think we already spoke about 8 years, because the books of accounts need to be preserved for 8 years. So keep that in mind. And I spoke about management responsibility as well. I'm not going to look into it. What are the controls? Some of the organizations, if you have RCM, risk control matrix, as a part of internal financial controls, this is a new risk you have to add. I repeat, if you have a risk control matrix, some organizations, as a part of IFC, internal financial controls, or ICOFA, internal controls over financial reporting, whatever is the terminology you use, right? Depending on listed, unlisted, whatever fancy names. Make sure in your R2R process, record to report process, this point on audit trail, or it could be even IT general control point, make sure that the audit trail feature is appearing as a risk as well, right? So what are the controls you need to ensure? Controls to ensure audit trail has not been disabled or deactivated. Controls to ensure that user IDs are assigned to each and every individual. Why is this? Sir, unless you assign user ID to each and every individual, audit trail will record some random person. There's no whole purpose of that user ID is defeated. So it is appearing in that audit trail because Mr. X or ABC is the username appearing, but that ABC account everybody in the organization is using. So how will you establish accountability? Right? Third, controls to ensure changes to configuration are authorized and logs are maintained for that. Right? So that's the third point. Fourth, audit trail is enabled, disabled, or whatever it is, and whether they've been accessed or maintained. Some of them ask me a question, sir, should audit trail be backed up? Right? Now, this is a little tricky question. The law has remained silent on the entire concept of audit trail, right? Sorry, backing up of audit trail. But imagine a situation, tomorrow some untoward incident happened, you lost the data. What will you do if you lose the data? You restore it. When you restore the data is appearing, but the audit trail is not getting restored, right? So next year when you're doing the audit, you have to check whether audit trail is retained for 8 years. So you'll obviously check previous year's data, which means assuming you are not able to restore it, then it's a problem. So indirectly, the reference is that audit trail should also be backed up, right? Whether you back that up in India, you keep it outside India, that is a little tricky situation. But my suggestion is, because the backup regulation says daily backup within India, it is recommended that you retain this within India, right? And controls to ensure these periodical backups are implemented, and all those fancy stuff. So these are few examples of controls which organization has to consider to implement, right? Now, what if I'm using a third-party software solution? This is what I told, something like a Zoho Books, right? So consider using independent auditor's report, what is popularly called as Service Organization Control Report, SOC 2 report or Type 2 report, or ISAE, SAE, SSAE 3402. You can go ahead and rely upon that report, which is basically assurance report at the service organization. So independent auditor gives an opinion. Some of them have spoken specifically. There's a paragraph on this. You can go ahead and look upon that, right? So that is something from a software provider per se. From an auditor perspective, what is it that is the most important thing is whether the configuration allows you to enable and disable. I'll give a classical example. This is something which you should ask as a question as well. What if this audit trail is enabled for some time, disabled, entries are passed, re-enabled? What will you do? Right? For that period of disabling and enabling, some adjustment, some untoward thing took place, and these people are not able to produce. So it becomes a tricky question, right? So as an auditor, also ask them a question. How do we get to know it is disabled? And if you have a test environment, ask them to show it in the test environment, right? It will be a good use case, right? Next, how do I access such configuration? Right? What are the configuration? Who can go and make such configuration? In fact, as a matter of fact, configuration is also something where you have to enable an audit trail. So if you're changing settings from one to B, A to B, you need to have an audit trail, right? And periodic review mechanism, right? So these are typically from an auditor, what you'll have to consider, right? So I'll pick up some practical use case. Before I head into that, I think about 30 minutes or I've spoken about various examples or various conceptually. I'll be happy to take a couple of questions so that, once we go into the practical elements, you will get some more insights. And of course, I'll also show you how we could use our ICA guidance note, how you can use Chat GPT for audit trail, some of those smaller, finer nuances. I'll also cover about that. Yeah. Can I see if there are some more questions? I think I see questions in the Q&A window. I'll probably pick it up so that, it will be easier. Organizers need not look into it. And bear in mind, all questions only in the Q&A window, nowhere else, right? Okay. Is there anything to be mentioned in the notes in the financial statements? Shrikant is asking. Shrikant, there is nothing to be mentioned in the financial statements. In the audit report, there is a paragraph to be mentioned, which I will tell you, which I'll show it to you in some time, right? So I think I've answered that. Kindly also cover requirement of having the data center. Okay, I'll cover that a little later. Tapas, okay, since you have asked me, I'll just make a mention of it. There is another rule which is effective from 2022 September. I think September or August, I'm not able to recollect. Probably, you can just search that. I think August or September 2022. This is effective from 22-23 financial year, at least 6 months afterwards. It says every company having books of accounts, I repeat, every company having books of accounts should have a backup daily performed, and it should be locally within India. This happened because some of these companies suddenly disappeared and they said that, we can no longer give you audit trail, or no longer give you our data. So Indians, they felt that, okay, by relying too much on these multinational companies, we might lose out the data. So therefore, the law said, if you are having any financial reporting system software, you should mandatorily enable a daily backup. That daily backup has to be stored only in India. The primary server can be outside India, but the backup has to be in India. That's what it is, right? So Tapas, I hope I've answered your question. Another question which is coming up from Tapas, whether the following softwares will also be required. I think I spoke about this. Anything, go with the definition of books of accounts. So you have given a few examples of so many solutions. To me, Zoho payroll or payroll solution, I think would be required. Rest, I don't see a necessity. In how to check Tally is enabled at database level. Abhishek, Tally does not have audit trail at a database level. It's very, very clear because it is impossible, because the Tally database sits in a separate folder. Unless you lock that folder that nobody can make some changes, it is very difficult. So practically, audit trail at a database in Tally is difficult, right? Somebody can pass entry somewhere else, right, and just take that file and put it over here. Perhaps it might be a little tricky situation, right? So it does not have that. ABC Private Limited has outsourced the accounting function to a CA firm who uses Tally Prime Edit Log. Then whether statutory auditor of ABC is required to obtain okay, good question. So the question Bhavin is asking is, there is a company who's outsourced the accounting work to the CFO. Many companies do that. Now, statutory auditor is asking whether a SOC report of this CA firm is necessary. According to me, it is not necessary because the process or the focus is on the accounting software. So you can go back to the accounting software and check whether audit trail is there, and you could provide those requested reports for that, right? So that is sufficient. In the guidance note also, there is a small view which people are disputing it both the ways, because in a case of a SOC report, the focus is on SOC report or SAE report of software companies, right? So that is where it is mentioned. We'll address that again in a few minutes when I go through the FAQ as well. Okay. Next question which Akshay has got. Okay, I'm seeing questions are increasing so much. Okay. In case where user ID are not created in Tally as a management, we are okay with the same. It is not complies. No. So Tally, if it is not having a user ID, by default it will have some ID which will say that Mr. A or Mr. B is performed, right? So you, during your inquiry, you understand whether only one accountant is there, multiple accountants are there. If only one accountant is there, it really doesn't matter. If multiple accountants are there, it's recommended to have different user IDs for each of them. Share an example for database. I think I spoke about it. Database is nothing but the backend layer where actually data sits, right? One could consider that Tally 10001 or 10002 folder, whatever is there, within that whatever is sitting, that could be an example of a database, right? So that is something which you should be looking into. Is a CA expected by CA to conduct audit, edit log, backend check on his own, or relying like system? You will have to perform. At the end of the day, CA has to give an opinion. You can rely with whatever procedures or protocol. At the end of the day, you as an auditor will have to give that opinion. In the next year, will there be a need to check edit log for the previous year? Yes, I told you, because from a retention perspective, you will have to check it. How can we comply with checking audit trail in case we have certain trial balance items maintained manually in Excel? For example, fixed asset register, and others are recorded in accounting system, for example, Navision. To the extent which is maintained through accounting software, please go ahead and refer an audit trail. Excel and other things is a little bit of an interpretation. If it is not automated, that's the view which many of them have taken. You can probably skip the requirement of audit trail. In case of FMCG, pharma, business hours, 8 to 10 sales invoices are open and transaction completed after final check, authorized person go for. In this process, some items are added and deleted. How to go ahead? As long as you have, see, please note, the session is to focus on how to audit trail. If an entry comes in audit trail, you have to perform your normal auditing procedures. Now you have identified an entry appearing in audit trail. As an auditor, go check what you have to do, how you have to do, and all of those things, right? So that I think is the typical protocol. Our data is on the US server of Zoho due to some decisions taken earlier. Zoho does not allow backup of less than 15 days. What is the penalty? Sir, please refer to the Companies Act. All of those penalties comes into picture, right? I'm not going to get into that, but I think you have an option. Write to them. They might probably consider shifting you into some of these. Please go ahead and do that. What is the process through which audit trail? I'll probably take 2 more questions and I'll stop, because I think we are going too much into the question answer mode, because I wanted to also speak on some practical elements. I thought when I started questions, it was only 4. Now I'm seeing at least I've already answered 15 questions. Okay. What is the process through which audit trail based from company derived by CA or go to information of management? Please do your audit procedures, ask questions. In fact, some of them we'll cover in the practical aspects. How do we verify as auditors the third-party invoices that we receive and their software? Do we go to extent? Example, run a hotel and I use Zomato service and they will provide invoice. Do I need to check edit log as well? No. In those cases, there are limitations. You will have to check whether to what extent you can rely upon that solution where you're getting it. And that becomes your feed, and that is anyways outside your purview. So you may have to keep them outside. It could be another view which people are taken as, hey, that is also my invoice software, but that is not maintained by the organization. It is maintained by a company like Zomato. So therefore, it is outside the purview of this particular audit, right? So anyways, I'll stop for now the questions. Hopefully you are finding it useful and you are able to make good on whatever questions and clarifications which we are speaking. Maybe you can give a couple of them, can give a thumbs up into the chat window or this thing, and we'll quickly go ahead. Thank you. Now, in terms of practical use cases, what are the challenges? How as auditors will have to look into? A couple of them I'll just pick up as an example. One is a typical SAP, right? In SAP, what happens? Obviously, there are multi-layers. You will have to check on so many other elements and things like that. So in an example of a SAP, what is it that you'll have to check? Whether an audit trail is configured or not configured. The simplest thing which you will do is, you will go to a table, and let me also give you an explanation. When you are auditing SAP, it's a fairly complex setup. I might probably just give you small tips and tricks, or to say this is how it works, this is how it is done, this is how it is not done. So I'll probably put it like this. SAP has multiple tables, and the way you should understand a table is, a table is having some data, right? Now the purpose of each table you and I will not know, and it is impossible for us to know the purpose of every table in SAP. Even the SAP architects, right, they will not know 100% why each table is used for what. So remember, the rule of thumb is, first check, and this you can ask that SAP person itself, whoever is the administrator, to see whether in the table DD09, whether audit log is enabled or not. I'll show you one screenshot just for reference, right? And you can also check in this T code TU04, whether the audit trail from what date it is enabled. You'll have to refer this parameter called REC/client. You will probably be able to get that. I'll give you one example. This is one of the parameters. You can notice that name REC/client, instead of client, sometimes name would appear. And here it is mentioned that parameter description activate or deactivate. So basically you're saying, I'm just giving you example, what are the values it is permitted. So if it is activated, that indicates that yes, it is there, otherwise it is not, right? As simple as that. Second, this is that the other table which I said, where you can look into REC/client, and new parameter, it says all, and it says from 14/1/2024. That means from that date, this organization has actually enabled. That's a simple way of looking at it, right? So this is the first example which I wanted to give you a perspective. And this is the DD009L, which also indicates what is the value prior, post, etc., right? Which indicates that whether this audit trail is being enabled or not, right? Let's go to the second example. What should the edit log report contain? We normally say 3 W's. Who made the change? What was the data which was changed? Old value and the new value. And when were the changes made, right? So first is old value versus new value. Second is when the changes were made. And third is the timestamp, date and timestamp, whatever is there, right? Just give me 1 minute, sorry. Sorry. Yeah. So edit log report contains 3 W's which I said, right? Who made the change? What data was changed? That is the old value and new value. And what were the changes? In order to identify this, and this is what is the most important thing, you will go and run 2 reports in SAP. It's called CDHDR. And by the way, SAP sometimes, people might think, hey, why do we have to remember so many T codes? But SAP runs that way. You can, if you choose not to remember the T code, you have to go to the navigation window and all of those. But the simpler approach is use this, right? CDHDR, CD POS, right? This report, you need to run it for financial year 23-24, meaning 1st April 2023 to 31st March 2024. And then you can check for all the documents, records, whatever tables are there. You can also use T code FB03 to identify if any documents have been changed, attachments or anything on those lines. So let's probably look into a couple of screenshots. So this is how it will appear. It will say table CD HDR. There are some object IDs and other things, and you can see that the change, what is there, right? Who is the username who's performed, what date this was performed, right? What are the transactions? And look one level below, you will also find what is called as the old value and the new value, what is highlighted in green, right? So the old value as well as new value is recorded and mentioned, right? Hopefully it will help you to understand how the SAP landscape is. And in the FB03 report, it will talk about the what, why, when, etc. So here there is some document ID. For simplicity sake, understand document number to be a journal voucher number of this company code, some company name, right? And it is what it is done is on 6/10/2023, there is some parameters which is changed. From USD, they made it USD2. Some parameters they have changed. So it indicates who has done it, what time it is done, when it was done, etc. So this is a typical example how a screenshot of this configuration is set, right? I hope this sort of gives you some visibility. Some T codes are there which I've made a mention, and today this is all available online in the internet. You can just pull them, right? Now, what are the issues which we notice in all of this, right? Some of the issues is that Audit Trail is enabled only for certain tables and not all tables. Because the most common answer which we get is, sir, if we enable Audit Trail for every table, then the performance of the entire SAP is affected, which I agree, right? So you cannot expect a security watchdog to sort of look into every transaction end to end and things like that, right? So you will obviously have some sort of a challenge. But what you could do to rectify that is identify which are the key tables, spend some time with the management, look into financial stable assertions. You will be able to come to a conclusion whether this is doable, not doable, right? So that's one of the most popular issue which you have noticed in SAP. I'll come to Tally and other things, the configuration, but because we have mentioned the issue, in case of a Tally Prime, right, there is a solution specifically called edit log version, right? So unfortunately, on migration of edit log version 2.1 to edit log higher version, the username is removed from edit logs. We have sort of noticed in some of the clients. I'm not sure if this is a common issue across the table. I'll be happy to learn from you as well. But this is something which we have noticed. But at least the cruxes remain the same, and therefore we are retaining the old version and sort of going ahead, right? Next, many organizations obviously are not aware which all softwares for which they need to do. They say only for ERP we will do, or only for accounting, SAP, etc. But you'll have to follow the books of accounts definition, right? Now, the biggest issue which we are noticing, and this is happening even in listed company, that the database is not having audit trail, right? I'll show you an example. This is, I think, one of the companies, listed companies, where it was mentioned like this in the audit report. Based on our examination, which include test checks, the company has used an accounting software for maintaining its books of accounts, which has the feature of recording audit trail, that is edit log and facility, except audit trail was not enabled at the database level to log any direct changes. So this is what I was mentioning. Backend or the direct changes made at the database, it has not been enabled. So this is the most common observation which I've noticed across listed companies. Some companies have put a table also, application, etc. But generally they avoid going into so much of detail because nobody wants to reveal what accounting software, what customizations and other things are. So it's a little bit of a dicey situation there. But yes, that is what is going. Let's also look into an example like NetSuite. Right, this is an example of how you get an audit trail in a NetSuite. NetSuite is one other popular solution from Oracle. It's a SaaS solution, and SaaS solution they are able to provide this sort of a report: old value, new value, what is the changes, etc. You are able to get some visibility. Let me see what else I have from a practicality. Yeah, this is again NetSuite. I think I placed that slide incorrectly. So if you have to go to NetSuite and obtain this, you'll have to go under the option called Administration Controls. Under that Audit Trail, you will be able to identify multiple audit trails out there. It could be, search, it could be script, it could be, system notes, and you sit with the application team. They will be able to give you a perspective, what are critical and what is the meaning of each of them, and you get some comfort. And some of organizations are also using Microsoft Dynamics. It's again a solution by Microsoft. Right, Dynamics 365 is what is the name, and there's an example of how that log looks like. What is the time at which some of these elements are actually performed. Right, it'll have some master data, what changes you have performed and things like that. Right. So I'll also quickly head into this Tally and Zoho, how this audit trail works. So give me a minute. I'll just quickly swap into another screen where you should be able to get some more visibility. Yeah. So this is on Microsoft Dynamics. In fact, all of these are just Google search. Just type Microsoft Dynamics Audit Trail. It will give you this. It will talk about what audit trail is, right? What is the requirements? And they speak specifically that the following is available: accounting data, trade data, other data. In accounting data, they say finance, the audit trail function at the voucher transaction inquiry page is available. You can fetch that, right? So you can go to this particular page, and this is available in the Microsoft Dynamics web page itself. You can just go pick it up and you'll be able to look into it. Hopefully you're able to see what I'm trying to showcase, right? Accounting data related aspects, right? And it also talks about audit trail inquiry feature where you have journal entries. Then you have for trade data, right? And then you also have it for database. This is also something which is good, where they have enabled, and how to configure the database logging, everything is available. So if you are dealing with Microsoft Dynamics, yes, this is definitely a good place where you can look into it. You just go search online Microsoft Dynamics audit trail requirements. The first link, it will take you through this, because so many of them have searched it. The next thing which I'm going to head into is in Oracle. If you're using Oracle e-business suite, I think earlier it was called as JD Edwards, is what I remember very long back. I might be wrong. You can just quickly check. And it talks about how you have to enable audit trail. You need to grant those access, custom tables, turn on audit trail, and you will be able to check that. Again, search word in Google, audit trail Oracle, you will be able to get this. Something which I really liked is this particular article, which Oracle has published only for the Indian context, right? Because many of them might be using different ERP softwares, but the backend database belongs to Oracle, right? So therefore, how should that Oracle database functionality work in the context of Rule 11G of the Companies Act? This is available in the Oracle's website, right? You can probably go look at it. It talks about some general GAN and other things. It talks about executive summary, what are the regulations, and then there is ICA guidance note, and based on this we have tried to explain whatever is the requirement, right? So let's scroll down here. Of course, it will speak about same thing, what is the Companies Act requirement, Rule 11s, etc. We'll probably skip all of those. Maybe they heard one of our members session and they picked up all of this information, but yes, comes here. The approach, the scope to ensure integrity, reliability, and completeness of audit trail, refer section E, right, where they've explained all of this. And they've said description of Oracle database functionality, right? So to determine the suitability of Oracle database, it is given over here. Each section responds to a particular type of instance, right? So if Oracle database is used for storing and processing, consult the accounting software vendor for comprehensive sensitivity check, and they've given some data discovery solutions that will give a heads up whether this trail is available or not, right? That's one example. Then it says what are the do's and don'ts. you need to look specifically into what is called as CDC, change data capture, where it is, applicable. Next, to ensure audit trail is capturing who as the person who's made the changes, they are given some procedural aspects. You can go ahead and give it a shot. And my suggestion is don't break your head, because this would generally, if you give this guidance, the person who is using Oracle, their software team will be able to help you out, right? And this is an example of a unified audit trail which is shown or extracted from the database level, right? So the DB username, what is the object which is modified, and things like that. So this you can relate it back to the good old bank statements which used to get print out, right? It used to be in that huge sheet where multiple columns are there. The approach will be a little that way, because these are all legacy solutions, right? What data was changed and how it was changed, you will again have to run some of these queries and questions. Again, this is just a guide for you how you should go ahead and do it, and it will give you tables like this. So this is a SQL output. SQL means structured query language, right? It will say what is it that is being performed, what are the columns which have been changed, for example, Aadhaar, city, etc. What is the old value, what is the new value, right? You're entering something for the first time, it is appearing, right? And Oracle database functionality will also talk about downtime history. What has somebody gone and disabled the audit trail? Somebody has put the database downtime and things like that. So you will get all these visibility, right? So that's basically how the Oracle audit trail guidance is given. Let's quickly go to the next one. This is Oracle's own NetSuite, where it talks about, again, you can go and search NetSuite audit trail. And I already showed you the screenshot also, if you recollect. Just to reiterate, this was the screenshot which I was speaking of, right? NetSuite, where you can go pick up this information. It is available. But in case you want from a configuration perspective, it is available. Again, the Google search, the word you have to use is Oracle NetSuite Audit Trail Requirements. It will take you to application operational security, and you will get that, right? And it talks about what are the guidance they are adhering to, etc. Next comes Zoho Books. Of late, many of them within India have moved to Zoho Books, and therefore the question is, how do I check the audit trail within that? So you have to go to the reports, and under the reports you have what is called activity log. Under the activity log, click an arrow mark. You would get all these details, and if you go click on the right hand side, you will get the details of who are all the person, what changes they have done, etc. Click compare. You can get to know what is the old versus the new. In case something is appearing there, you can always go ahead and identify that, right? So that's basically audit trail from a Zoho book standpoint. Next is Tally Prime. And by the way, for this, you have to use a separate software of Tally, right? It's called Audit Trail Edit Log software. I mean, a separate version. So you can go and pick that up, and there it will have an edit log which will capture all these information. An example could be, it will share something like this: deleted, admin, user made the changes, what is the report comparison, etc. I will also show you how this you could in Tally, you can extract it. Just give me a few minutes. I will show that to you, right? And this is what is called the Tally Prime Edit Log Release. You will have to follow that only. If you're using Tally Prime, it is not sufficient. You should use Tally Prime Edit Log Release. Otherwise, this will not be applicable, right? So, I mean, this logs you may not be able to pull it up. So let me go back to this presentation. I think I have some slides. Yeah, this is what is the edit log I was speaking of. And this is how an example of a transaction could appear, right? Under this, what you should do is in the right hand side, you have what is called basis of value. In Tally Prime, you have this feature. Click on basis of value. Alternatively, it's Control B. Under that, you will have a report which says all vouchers altered or non-altered, right? When you pull that up, you will get the edit log, what you're seeing below, right? That's how you extract it. And it will also give you the version between the old and new. The beauty is that whatever is changed, it will give you a color. Shipping document, destination, terms, all of these are audited. Mind you, my dear friends, the audit trail is, we are discussing only whether it's enabled, disabled, all of that story. Out of audit trail, if you get some outcome, it is left up to your prudence and your discussion as to how you need to treat that, how you need to take that conversation ahead, right? Whether it's a legitimate, illegitimate, it's all a call which you have to take, right? Based upon this, you want to assess fraud risk. Based upon that, you want to assess internal controls failing. All that story will come into your bucket, right? So that is something which you have to take upon. And this is another example of an audit trail, how it could change, right? And then of course we have the ICA guidance note, which talks about what are all the aspects to it. So I'll come to the ICA guidance note in a minute. I think I had something else. Yeah. I think I had something on how to use Chat GPT for this. But before that, this is the detailed ICA guidance note implementing guidance note on Audit Trail. And this is a 2024 edition. And it talks about a lot of interesting things. Of course, the first one is on March, and then January they've revised it. A worthy document for you to go through. And it talks about, especially in this page, if you look into the contents a little later below here, you will find this section. And after that, section 2, which is the newly added 27 to 56, which is very good, worthy to explore and understand some of the most popularly asked questions, right? So there you will find all of these questions which you generally have, you will get answers from that. Okay, so I'll pause for a minute to take some questions, and then I'll talk about other interesting things, uh, the illustrative findings. I'll also probably speak about that. I think I have some web link where I saw one of the LinkedIn post where I saw one author had compiled how the entire guidance note is interpreted. I think this was done by CA Vishal Doshi, the Central Council member. So he is spoken about, and this link is available online. You can again search that. It talks about reporting done by statutory auditors. What are the format which is being followed, right? In this, the blue ones are basically the ones where there is a non-compliance, right? And this is all taken from the audit report. Based on our examination, the company has to use Audit Trail, except that the Audit Trail was not enabled at database level. This is the most common observation which you will find, right? And in consolidated, the holding company has used an accounting software for maintaining books, which has Audit Trail, except that the Audit Trail was not enabled at database. For accounting software, the same story, right? So wherever they have a holding company, they have also reported that, right? Again, here, based on our test checks performed, auditors of subsidiaries which are companies incorporated in India whose financial statements, the holding company and subsidiaries have used accounting software, they are compliant. Further, in course of audit, we and our respective auditors did not come across instance of Audit Trail being tampered, right? So these are just basically explaining whatever is there. I'll go into some observations. Yeah, this is something which is nice from a TCS, right? So reporting under Rule 11G, the company has used accounting software throughout there for all relevant. The feature of accounting Audit Trail was not enabled in the database. You can notice that, right? For any direct data change for the accounting software used for maintaining books accounts relating to payroll, consolidation, whatever. The feature of recording Audit Trail facility was not enabled in the application layer relating to revenue, trade receivable, general ledger for the period 1st April to 13th November and relating to PPE until 14th December. This is what, as I said, many organizations partially they have done that. Further, for periods where Audit Trail was enabled and operated throughout the year, we did not come across any instances, right? In the consolidated, again, they have spoken more or less on the same thing, but they make a mention in case of holding company and its 3 subsidiaries incorporated in India, the feature of Audit Trail was not enabled at the database level. In case of holding company and the feature of Audit Trail enabled a database for any data changes for accounting software was not enabled. In case of holding company and 3 subsidiaries incorporated in India, so look into it. Everywhere they are making mention of subsidiaries incorporated in India. So for outside India, it is slightly subjective, as I made a mention. I'm just looking through any other observation. Okay, this is another company where it says the feature of recording was not enabled for certain changes in the accounting software. then it was not enabled for database level to log any direct changes. So you look into it, most common observation is that the database does not have it, right? So I think this should give you a fair bit of idea on practical nuances and how it should come up with. Again, I'll leave this guidance or this links. In fact, I can compile most of these URLs and I'll see how I can share that with CTC so that you can probably look into it. You have HUL also, they have mentioned Audit Trail was not enabled at database layer. We are unable to comment if Audit Trail was enabled at database layer for third-party service provider. For one accounting software, changes to application by a super user does not have a feature of concurrent real-time audit trail. Maybe whatever, right? And generally, they have tried to avoid mentioning the names of the solution for obvious reasons. I told you in the beginning of the conversation, right? So this is a fairly detailed document worthy to explore. So what I'll do is I will take some more Q&A now, and from there we will probably come back to what is it called, using chat gpt and other modern solutions for helping us solve the problem, right? Feel free to put in your comments and this thing, and of course, in case you want to unmute and then we should speak, I'll be happy to do that also, of course, a little later. Okay, some questions which has come up. How do we as auditors the third party invoices that we receive in the software? Okay, I think I've answered this, which is something with Zomato. Sometimes petty checks are received and bank pay in slip we are updating, edited every time new check is added in a slip. As I said, sir, you will have to take a call whether an entry in an audit trail is correct or not. There could be genuine reasons of an entry appearing in audit trail. Go ahead, as an auditor, you put it in your documentation. There's a legitimate entry. Few smaller companies, accounting is done only at the end of year end or sometimes in September. Sometimes there is just bank statement with 5 to 7 entries and no accounts are maintained. Excel is there. What should be done case? Charmisha, I think the answer is simple. If you are doing it at the end of the year, it doesn't matter as long as your audit trail is recording that these transactions have taken place, right? So I'm okay with that. However, as I said, if you're maintaining in Excel, there's slightly an interpretation issue, right? So refer to the guidance note where they've given some answers. So the way it is generally understood, it is automated software solution is where you will require some of these things. But to me, even if it's an Excel, audit trail is technically necessary, but Excel does not have a feature. So just go ahead and give a disclaimer there and ask them to at least start using some simple software like a Tally or anything on those things. How do I check audit trail in SAP B1? Ghanshyam, more or less similar approach. Only difference in SAP B1, it is a SaaS solution. So you will have to speak with the SaaS vendor or the solution player. He will be able to help you out with this thing. It may not be this level of detail, but you can definitely be able to obtain some amount of information. Do you have edit lag for Navision or Microsoft 365? I just spoke about this. Navision, Microsoft 365, Dynamics, all of them have that feature. Audit trail be disabled for Oracle Fusion? If it's a SaaS solution, normally that configuration for disabling will not be there. You will have to go to the login console and check what are the features given to the user. Generally, this feature is not given. Oracle has provided a write-up mentioning trail cannot be disabled by the user entity. That's great. We could refer that. My statutory order states that they need audit trail for all employee logins. We are trying to convince them that we have audit trail for admin logins, as maintaining audit trail for all employees would result in higher storage limit. Okay. This is what I was mentioning. Please note, audit trail is not specifically written only for employee or admin. That may be the way you have designed in your organization. Technically, audit trail is required for all edit transactions. So I have passed the first time journal entry with my name, details, time is appearing. I am not having an audit log for that. It is okay. But if I'm editing that entry, I need to have an audit log. I'll explain audit trail non-maintenance at database level. I think I've spoken about it, but I'll just give you a quick mention of it. As I said, application and database are two separate things. Within the database, there is a mandatory requirement to maintain this audit trail. And generally, it is done through a software such as DAM, Database Access Management Solution, Privileged Access Management Solution, Privileged Identity Access Solution, etc. It will keep a trail of what all activities have been performed. Okay, so that I think should reasonably help you to understand these perspectives. And I'll quickly talk about our CA GPT, which could be considered useful for, which is your chat GPT customized for our CA institute. So you can go to ai.ica.org where they have this CA GPT, where you can go and click on accounting standards and auditing standards board, right? So if you go click on auditing and assurance standards board, click on this icon, you will have the CA GPT coming up. And this, even if you are not having you just need to have a chat GPT account, that's all, right? You will still be able to go ahead and use this. So what you can do is you can write a basic prompt saying, can you help me with the requirements of audit trail as per ICA guidance? Of course, you will have to exercise your caution. There is a disclaimer and other things, but this is a good document for you to get started. Right now, it is searching the knowledge because it is searching the ICA knowledge repository, and from there we will be able to pick up something. So let's quickly see. It says this is what is the revised edition. What are the key responsibilities? What are the auditor's responsibility? You can ask questions, and you could get some sort of a easier answer, right? So you can say, I am preparing financials in Excel. Is audit trail required? Ask some random questions. Again, I would suggest you to look into each and every scenario by taking adequate caution, right? So the requirement to maintain audit trail is mandated. This applies regardless of the software, right? Including Excel. Tracking changes, document changes, security access, internal control, retention. So therefore, as I said, Excel you have to invariably maintain. That's my view. Only thing is that automated, there is one small loophole. You could probably see whether you can, it's again a careful interpretation which you'll have to look at. So you can ask again, what are the cases where audit trail is not required or it is relaxed? It's more of a chatbot, as I said. You ask a question, it will search from the repository, and then it will give you that answer. And it clearly says where it is. Right here, it says provides specific circumstances where requirement of maintaining audit trail is not mandatory. Technical glitches: if a company encounters technical glitches during any part of the financial year due to which audit trail remains non-functional, cannot function, this does not exempt the management. The auditor must appropriately modify the commit. Third-party software maintenance, migration to new software, no transactions, backup preservation, error logs, specific reporting requirements, right? So they've given some specific questions, right? And then you can also ask, summarize the FAQs and other things. It will be able to answer them. So I think this should, in general, help you. And of course, this is the guidance note. I think I already made a mention. Page 27 onwards is the FAQs, which is fairly detailed, and they've given all of this information. Or rather, more than information, they've given this as a Q&A. Implication of audit trail not operation throughout the year, right? Is specialist or expert by auditor? Most of your questions, whatever you ask, they've made a reference to the guidance note and they've answered that, right? So it will be a good way in which you can probably look into this. FAQ is something which I really liked it. This happened, I think, this year when they published it. So yeah. What also happens, impact of this audit trail on internal financial controls. If you remember, I also spoke about this and I gave a cross reference. It can be a part of your IFC, ITGC as well. Reliance of information system auditor like SOC 2 report. They've also given about these references and these basic questions. Right. So if there's any more questions, I'll be happy to take. If it is not possible to implement audit trail entirely a database, whether we should modify? Yes, Abhishek, you should go ahead and modify. Go ahead and modify that. And I also showed you an example of what is a modified script. So I think that brings me to the major thing which I want to discuss. I want to keep it short and sweet, give you a perspective of what is audit trail, what are the nuances, how do you practically look into it, and what are, of course, some of the challenges. Happy to discuss slightly something more, and whatever clarifications we have, we will be happy to I'll be happy to help you out, right? Let me know, I'm here for some more time. In case you want to unmute and ask questions as well, subject to organizers how they want it, I am fairly okay with it. Thank you.
Any questions?
Yeah, I think most of the questions I've answered as and when it came through.
Yeah.
There is something more which we can probably pick up. And if you have any feedback, any of the thoughts, feel free to, quickly write to me. I will be able to help you out.
Yes, yes. No further questions. I think you have covered session that I think most of the questions were answered. I think one question has come for Tally, how to check audit trail for database.
Database, we don't have an option to check it, sir. We don't have an option to check it for Tally within a database, because for a simple reason, the database is hosted in a particular folder within the operating system. So anybody can go ahead and do it unless you have enabled an audit log feature within the operating system, etc. It becomes a little complicated setup.
Just to push this question further, so basically, when we store at a single data place, and say, for example, it's a Microsoft system, Microsoft operating software, and any which ways Microsoft by itself is having its log. So if anyone is directly going into that particular software data folder and replacing that particular data set or something of that tally gets recorded. So can we say that edit log is enabled for the database? Just can we?
Little tricky. I'll ask this question at next level, right? If I'm doing a file change, you have a file, I've modified the file, simple, or I've replaced the file. Will I have a track of the old and the new? It'll only say, it might only say that some such an activity may have taken place or some file has been done, right?
Yes.
But I
Yes.
have my own reservations whether it will be able to say what is the old file, what is the new file, what is the old value, new value, and things like that.
Correct. Correct.
So that's why the safe bet is to go ahead and make a disclosure saying this is not maintained. That's it.
Understood. It was just one of the questions, which we were having with our client.
I agree with you. I agree with you. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, from a client, they are trying to give every possible justification, right? But for me, I am only looking from it. Okay, I agree with whatever you're saying, but reality is we'll have to face it, right? Whatever is the
Yeah,
situation.
totally agreed. Yeah.
Documentation perspective.
Correct. We have some more questions. If you're okay, we can
I'll,
take.
I'll quickly take it up. So I think I spoke about Tally. How to deal with Audit Trail in case of other software which entities uses to support accounting. Example, Dynamics for payroll, ClickView for sales, but the base is done with Navision. So Navision, you'll have to check it. And these other softwares, if they are falling within the definition of books of accounts, Virenji, you have to still go ahead and document and showcase that whether you maintain this books of accounts or not, whether you maintain this audit trail or not. In the audit report, do we have to make reference that the accounting function is outsourced by the company? I don't think that is necessary. It is more of your internal documentation, Bhavinji. But from a reporting perspective, you have to draw comfort whether that audit solution has that. Similar change can also be made for any other database. Yes. It can be made for any other database. You can keep a track of it as long as the solution is deployed. If solution is not there, direct access or a database access monitoring solution is not there, you cannot catch hold of it. If the database audit trail is not available entirely, then we need to mention specifically, yes, Girish, I told you that. You will have to mention similar to whatever note I have mentioned. You could go ahead and mention that. Any more questions? We can probably give a couple of minutes more maybe. Also given one sample illustrative, I've just sent it on the message, how that particular note is mentioned. in terms of reporting, so that participants can pick it up. Of course, I'll share the URLs and other things also into the PPT.
Think no further questions now. And I think the session was covered quite in a great detail, Narasimhanji. I
Thank
think
you.
lot many people, there was a confusion about what is application layer, what is a database layer. I think you covered in a very simple form and giving a practical insight as to how to even check that audit trail. I think that would have really benefited the participants, and we can see from the comments from the participant that they really liked the session. Of
Thank you.
course, with your permission, we will host your presentation on CTC
Sure.
website
Please go
so
ahead.
that people can refer that presentation whenever they are actually facing the situation. And thanks for your time from a busy schedule to guide us on this, a very important and a very new topic for people who are not so much acquainted with very technical jargons. I think your auditors are maybe good in numbers, but in terms of technical jargons, we are yet not so great in IT matters. But with, I think you simplified that topic. And now I will request just Deepak to, I think, give a very hearty vote of thanks. Yeah,
Uh,
Deepak.
Thank you, Tejas bhai, for this. Narasimhanji, truly amazing session.
Thank
You
you.
have explained the concept really well with all the practical insights. One thing is very clear that way technology is going, and it is pushing all us chartered accountant in at such a level. So we should not. One thing is very clear that we should not be rigid. We should be agile to it, and we should be completely blended into it so that we can walk with the speed with which the our government is going or the requirements are going. And you have been a very good driving force for all us chartered accountants today, and you have made us sit into that pace car and try to acquaint wherever we are from this level to what you have already stated. So thank you very much on behalf of the Chamber of Tax Consultants, all participants, and us. You have really enhanced our knowledge, and we really look forward, to have more and more sessions with you. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Special mention to my
Narasimhanji, we
team,
will.
my colleagues as well, Shreyans and Rishabh, who helped me out in preparing this presentation. Generally, I had them, their names as well. Sorry, I think I missed out this time. Thank you, my friends, for helping me out.
Narasimhanji, you can also share your articles also on this topic wherever in whichever forum, and I think the participants can read through all the articles and then take a very prudent call in reporting on audit. It will be
Sure.
really very helpful.
I'll plan something on that.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so
Thanks
much.
a lot.
Thank you.
We
Thank,
will be
thank you very
closing
much.
the session. Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Yeah.